Hello Rebrand gang, welcome to episode 14 of Rebrand Everything. Today we're going to be looking at the new Staples logo and then creating 5 options of our own which you can vote on at the end. Let's go. So if you read design blogs and stuff, you probably will have seen that Staples have got a new logo. They've had a complete rebrand, complete refresh, which I feel like they needed. Their old logo looks like this, which I've always found really weird that they actually show a busted staple in their logo when their name is Staples. It feels to me a little bit like you've got a company called Perfect Mirrors and your logo has got a crack through it or something like that. It is literally the worst thing that can happen to a staple, and it's made it into their logo and they've had it for years. The new logo looks like this. There has been varying feedback online. I've joined a few Facebook groups and stuff and I've seen people talking about it. Some people like it, think, oh brilliant, new simplified look, really clear what it is. The icon fits with the text, all lovely, and they like the whole brand around it. And other people say that it looks like a football or soccer goal, which I can see that side of the argument as well. It bugs me that the thickness of the bottom parts of it is different to the thickness of the top. And I don't like the way the curves are on the outside. And then on the inside of the corners they've got the 90-degree angles. It just looks a little bit weird on my eyes. I definitely prefer the new logo to the old logo, but I do feel like that's been helped by the surrounding brand that's kind of won me over. I think the rest of the branding looks really cool and really fits well. It kind of feels a little bit more like just a new campaign for Staples rather than a whole new rebrand, but I think it's all looks much more modern and much better than that busted staple that they used to use. Before we get into the sketching stage, I just wanted to give a quick reminder to press like on this video if you like this video. You don't have to do it now, you can wait till the end, but just make sure you remember to press like as it really helps the channel. So as we dive into the sketching stage, I'm just literally taking everything that's in my head and putting it onto the page. As per usual, just complete crazy ideas and just getting them all out there. A few things I did think though, red has got to be included in the branding. I think if they suddenly changed to another colour now, it would just kill them dead because no one would recognise it. I think red is very important to their brand. Yes, I know it's being really pedantic, but they are called Staples, but yet they've only got one staple in their new logo. So I want to make sure our options have 2 or more staples just so it all fits and it's all perfect. I've drawn out a lot of different shapes that we could make out of these staple shapes because I thought it was important to take these staple icons and make it part of something bigger rather than just taking their new logo, changing the font and calling that a redesign. I wanted to really work them staple icons into something special. I also wrote down a few little ideas for slogans or strap lines that they might use. I thought maybe holding it together, securing your business, although that sounds more like a security firm, so maybe not that. And I just wrote a few more words down that I can think about later: join, secure, fasten, attach, bond, hold, all stuff that Staples do. So that was pretty much it for the sketching stage. I developed up the ideas in Illustrator, so let's go and see that. So as we slide into Adobe Illustrator, the first thing I did was get the old logo and the current logo on the side of my pasteboard for reference, and then I got to work on creating a staple icon that I was happy with. So it was a super easy job for me to just create a rectangle, take the bottom out, and then curve the corners until I thought that looked good. And then once I had them built, I was able to use them in my options. So option 1 was the very first idea that I drew down in the actual sketchbook, so I was eager to get that into Adobe Illustrator. The basic idea is using the staple icon for the top of the T and the body of the E, and then somehow finding a way to differentiate that from the actual letter while still making it very clear what it says. The difficulty was differentiating the staple from the actual font whilst keeping it legible. It's finding that when you put like a white line between it or like a gap between the staple and the letter, it was making it really hard to read, which is obviously not what you want. I was trying to find a way to balance it out, so I tried a few different things, like changing the colour of the actual text and then having the staple in red, which I kind of thought worked, but again made it a little bit harder to read than when everything is the same colour, because your eyes kind of stop at the top of the T, like what's that, and then stop at the E, and it kind of breaks the word up and it just makes it feel uncomfortable to read. So I ended up using these little soft shadows similar to what I used in the Pepsi Max project a few weeks ago, just so it's enough to show a separation but not enough to kind of stop your eyes as you're reading it. As I was working with this, I think that font was Montserrat, and then I just suddenly thought maybe because the top of the T was giving us these big sort of slab serif look, maybe I should be thinking about using a different font. So I did something that I don't think I've actually ever done and deliberately sought out the font called Courier. When I got Courier in there, I thought, yeah, this is actually working pretty well. It's getting quite a distinctive look. It definitely will stand out amongst the general modernised brands these days. I just wanted to modify the serifs to be a little bit smaller so that our staples stood out a bit better and it was a bit clear that that was an icon and not just part of the font. So for the next option, I wanted to work on creating the initial of the word staples, so working on making an S out of the staple icons. The battle was trying to make it stay looking like a staple as I developed it into the S shape, because obviously when you make one of the sides a little bit shorter, it doesn't really register in your mind as a staple. Found that as I was developing it, the staple was getting longer and longer and longer, but it was making a better S shape, so I sort of ran with it. But then I thought, hold on a sec, these staples are looking like unrecognizable now. It just looks like a road running through rather than staples. So I've tried like putting a red box behind it to make the staples at the end, but I just thought, nah, it just looks weird, it doesn't look right. So I compacted it all up, and I thought probably the best remedy would be keep these looking staple-ish, like interlinked like that, but then put a staple over the top and around the bottom of it, so there's kind of 4 staples in the logo. So I ended up with this solid and quite distinctive icon, which is kind of like 2 staples wrapped in another 2 staples, kind of like staple inception. In the research stage, I noticed that the Canadian Staples logo had 2 staples facing each other, and that they used that as an icon as part of their logo, which got me thinking perhaps we could use something like that. But instead of having it as an icon, we could use the bracket one end and the bracket the other end and have staples holding the word staples. I wanted the font to be big and strong, so I started drawing out a word mark. But I thought it started looking a little bit like Star Wars, and I absolutely hate Star Wars, so I just got rid of that and decided to draw out the brackets and just try some different fonts in there. The first fonts I chose looked clean and simple, but I felt like they lacked a bit of character. Which meant the whole logo was just feeling a little bit boring. It just looked like text in brackets, which is not anything special. So I decided to think about using some different fonts with a little bit more flair, a little bit more quirkiness, and found this one called ITC Cable, which I rarely use these days, but it seemed quirky enough without looking childish or silly. So I decided to go down the route of showing the staples when they're in their stack. So like, you know, before you put it in the staple gun, you get the big long things where they're all stuck together. So I started by taking our staple icon and just duplicating it up at 45 degrees, but it looked a little bit ugly and the silhouette was just not working for me. It was making a horrible shape. So I decided to get a little bit more artistic and kind of put some perspective on this. So I had our big staple at the front, pretty much like the current logo, and then kind of the side of staples that you can see kind of going off into the distance. As I was refining this, I thought that maybe the white lines could be the end of desks, so like lots of desks in a row in an office. Maybe I'm thinking into it a little bit too much, but if you could see that as well, just let me know in the comments below. Next up, I wanted to see if I could create a 3D box icon, but made from staples, as a way of creating an icon that implies that staples are sort of holding everything together, or sort of, you know, they're structural to your company, something like that. Just symbolizing that through a nice icon. I made the box just using rectangles and lines and the grid in Illustrator, and then I used the shape builder tool to cut away the bits that I didn't need. After that, I put a small stroke on there just to make it a little bit thicker, and also to round out some of the hard edges just to soften them up a little bit. I started off with the word mark by trying that crazy label font just to see if I could make something look good from that or make something work. But in the end, I felt like it looked just old-fashioned rather than retro or cool. So that is the Rebrand Gang's design process over for another week. Let's have a look at our final options. So before I show you the final options, I just want to remind you that the voting poll is up in the top right of the screen. The like button is down here somewhere, and also the subscribe button is the big red one. And then while you're there, you might as well press the little bell so that you don't miss anything in the future. So then, Rebrand Gang, here are our final options.